How much do you obsess over the first 10 minutes of your own movies?
That's a really good question. I think the first 10 minutes are the most important part. Steve Sable, who created NFL Films, was my mentor when I worked at NFL Films. It was my first job out of school. He said you want a really strong open, a really strong close, and keep everything in between really short. So I think you want to, the first 10 minutes you really have to grab people. Really the first 1 minute now, because people's attention spans, sometimes they're watching on their phone, or if they're not interested, they're just clicking. I know myself now with streaming, like on Netflix, my wife will get mad at me because I'm like, oh, let's turn this off. She's like, it's 3 minutes in. And I'm like, I'm not into it. So even my patience has worn thin, and it's something I knew I wanted to do with my scripted feature. And it's funny, in the script it worked fine, but when I watched it, it opens up with driving. Maybe the most boring thing you can open a movie with is two people in a car driving. Now, we really filmed them driving. It wasn't like green screen or anything. But driving's boring. Like, everybody does driving. To me, it's not the most dynamic way to start something. So what we did is we actually opened the film with like a really dramatic moment, and then put like 4 days earlier. Because I just wanted to show people like, hey, some cool shit's gonna happen. Stay tuned, So just give me 10 minutes. Something big's gonna happen here. And it's not just a father and son driving on a road trip. I mean, I was watching this, I'm like, oh my God, gotta have something else here. So yeah, and a close is really important. When I watched my movie for the first time in front of an audience, you cringe a little bit sometimes, like, oh, I wish I would do this differently, I could do that. But I think like the best thing my movie has going for me are like the last 10 to 15 minutes. Like they move, man, and it's like, it really gets going, and it's like, end strong, because what you leave people with is the most important thing. I don't know if you've ever seen the movie Field of Dreams. Yeah, Field of Dreams has that like classic moment where Kevin Costner goes, hey Dad, do you want to have a catch? And then he and his father, who is a ghost, or have a catch. And everyone loves that movie. But if you actually sit and watch the whole movie, there's a lot of weird stuff going on before that. There's a lot of dips in that, but people just remember that feeling you left them with. And like, wow, it's a great movie. It's one of my favorite movies because of that ending. So strong open, strong close, 100%.
And then keep it short in the middle.
I think so. I mean, I like shorter movies. I know I'm not the prototype of like cinema at all, of like who you would think like I don't, I don't like long movies. I mean, I liked The Batman. That was 3 hours. I like Top Gun Maverick, and I do like popcorn entertainment movies. I don't like that many independent movies, to be honest with you. It can be boring. I mean, I do like to be entertained, and I do have ADHD, so I'm willing to say it's probably me. I'm the issue. It's like that Taylor Swift song, like, I'm the problem, it's me. So I don't deny that. So I wanted for this, my independent film, to have like some thrills, like some action, some stuff to keep you invested in it, not just to have like two people talking in an apartment.
But I think what's great is when someone who doesn't necessarily like independent cinema, or when someone doesn't necessarily like sports, but when they see something in that genre and they can't stop watching it, then I think you have a real masterpiece. Because if you're getting people from outside of that sphere that's not your audience and they love it, The Last Dance, I watched every episode, but it's not something I would have sought out.
Yeah.
But once I watched one, I was ready to watch the rest of them. And I've been at restaurants where 30 for 30 is playing, and I can't stop focusing on it. You know?
That's what I've tried to do. I did one of the 30 for 30s I did was called I Hate Christian Laettner, and it has a kind of a catchy title. And all ESPN said is they wanted to do something on this player Christian Laettner, and I was like, who? Like I didn't even kind of remember who he was. Instead, though, it became kind of like hate in sports, like the fun version of hating, and like what's it mean to be a hater, and why do we like hating something more than liking it? Like we're more into booing something than cheering. So then it kind of became fun and pop culture-y, and that goes back to trying to find something that you like in the subject. So people might not necessarily have even known who that player was or not much about him, but they could get into the story because of just the whole idea of it and that kind of thing.
And what did you walk away from once that project was done? What was kind of your take about media from doing a film?
Well, perception is not reality. I think it was a big one. For instance, Christian Laettner went to Duke University. They have a reputation of being kind of hoity-toity, elitist, and back then Christian Laettner wore like sweaters and had that kind of had a real like frat boy haircut and look. But it turned out he grew up in Buffalo, New York, and people found out he went to a prep school, but he was on a scholarship for the prep school, and he was on a work program where he worked as a part of the custodial staff. And his mom was a school teacher and his dad worked in a factory. So I don't think perception is reality. And I think especially now, I see it and I actually feel really blessed with my work that I get to meet so many different kinds of people from different socioeconomic backgrounds, different race. And I find so much more unites us than separates us. And I've met people like, if I just knew them on Twitter, I'd be like, ugh. I can't. But then when you're having a face-to-face or you share a meal with them, you realize that in person, we have a lot more in common. And so I think it's important to get to know people. And, that's one thing that's a shame, like with COVID, we lost a lot of that. People became a little more isolated and insulated, more in like a circle and bubble. So I think it's important to get out there and realize that perceptions aren't reality. It's good to get to know people. Sometimes perceptions are reality too. You can learn that. So I feel fortunate in my work that I've gotten to travel the world and meet all different kinds of people. And I've found that for the most part, we're the same.
And is that part of what you do in your work when you take on a story about someone, that you're there to sort of shatter that perception?
Hopefully. I mean, I try to, again, make the subject relatable. For instance, I did a 30 for 30 on a wrestler, Ric Flair. And you see this guy and you're like, first of all, some people don't like wrestling. Just right off the jump. They're like, wrestling? No, thank you. And it's like, well, what does it take to become a wrestler? What do you have to go through? What's the work ethic that you need? What's the passion that goes into it? So we kind of broke that down, like the training he went through, how he learned how to throw a fake punch. And he talked about like barely hitting a string in his doorway and all the things, so that you're learning about this guy and suddenly it becomes more about a passion. Doesn't matter what it is. The same way someone can be into cooking, or you watch Jiro Dreams of Sushi and you don't have to like sushi, but you're just so much respect excellence. So it's like suddenly it became, well, what makes the greatest wrestler in the world the greatest? Because wrestling's predetermined. It's not like you can look at Tom Brady and say, well, he has all these stats and that makes him the greatest quarterback because he has the best stats. Wrestling's not. It's predetermined, it's choreographed. So how do you determine who the greatest wrestler is? So going into that, I think a compliment was, I don't really like wrestling, but I enjoyed that film. So that was huge to me.
How much of a story is artistic vision and how much is it audience, sort of like catering to the audience that will be there for that figure? There's going to be detractors or supporters of a certain, let's say, sports figure.
It's a balance. You got to strike that balance between people that already know maybe a lot about it, so you don't want to dumb things down for them, like where I've already seen this, or they're kind of treating me like I'm stupid, versus people that know nothing about the subject. You've got to ride that. So for the Nature Boy documentary, it fell into that. Everything up until that point, not any longer, but up until that point, I had seen on wrestling either fell into two categories. It was like really simplistic, like did you know like wrestling is predetermined, or like they break it down like you've never even seen this before, and they also kind of like talk down to you like that it's like a kind of it's a dumb endeavor, or they're looking at the underbelly of the profession, that it's the shady, skeevy thing and bad stuff happens during it, like steroids and misogyny and things like that. So I wanted to do something that appealed to wrestling fans like myself, who love it and get the spectacle and the enjoyment, and can live vicariously through the performers and all that, but also be able to explain it to somebody like my wife and make it more about the character. Like, yes, this is outlandish, and in this case, it was about how the subject had actually become the character he was playing. Like the lines became completely blurred between the real guy and this wrestler. So I try to do both. You definitely want to consider who your audience is, for sure, and where what you're doing, where is it going to play.
So it was almost like a method actor that took it too far, kind of a thing? Or?
Somewhat. I mean, wrestling's unique because it's not like you hear like cut, and back then in the 1980s, they were still trying to completely keep up the illusion that it was all on the up and up, that they really hated each other, they wouldn't travel with each other, like they had to be in separate hotels and all of that. So they call it like living the gimmick, that you would do it. So the character of Ric Flair was this like, big playboy, a different woman every night in a different hotel, private planes, kind of like almost ahead of its time as far as like the bravado, telling everybody how great he was. And he became that guy. What was he always that guy? I don't know. There's not that much documented of him, but the lines definitely blurred between the real guy and the Nature Boy. So, and he paid a price for it too. He lost a son and had some tragedy in his life.